John woke to his beloved flag torn, flowers trampled, and hateful words scrawled across his porch. An attack that cut deeper than any wound he'd faced in war. Anger burned in his chest, but beneath it something darker stirred. What drove a neighbor to such cruelty? But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. John Miller stood frozen at the edge of his shattered sanctuary, eyes scanning the wreckage that once bloomed with life and pride. The early morning sun cast long shadows over the ruined garden, highlighting the jagged tears in the once pristine American flag flapping listlessly on the ground. Every petal ripped from the flower beds, every smear of crude paint on his weathered porch stabbed at more than just his sense of order. It struck at the core of his identity. This yard was more than soil and plants. It was a living monument to sacrifices he had witnessed, to brothers in arms who never came home, to a past that refused to let him rest. The pain was sharp, but beneath it a slow, simmering fire began to burn. John's hands clenched into fists as memories flooded his mind. The long, grueling nights on distant battlefields, the weight of responsibility heavier than any pack. The faces of fallen Marines he vowed never to forget. His garden had been his peace offering to the world, a way to honor them quietly amid suburban monotony. Now that peace was shattered, violated by hands fueled by bitterness and jealousy. The Turner's house loomed beside his, an unspoken symbol of the growing tension. Mark Turner, once a respected contractor, had spiraled into frustration and resentment after losing his job months ago. Where John wore his scars as badges of honor, Mark's wounds were hidden behind a mask of envy and simmering rage. The way Mark's eyes lingered on John's flag, on the neatly trimmed lawn, betrayed a growing hatred that had festered beneath polite nods and forced smiles at neighborhood gatherings. John remembered the subtle digs, the whispered complaints about his military attitude and loud patriotism. To Mark, the flag was a provocation, a reminder of what he could no longer claim: respect, purpose, pride. John understood that jealousy was a dangerous seed, but it did little to soften the blow of betrayal by those he once called neighbors. The thought that people might blame him for stirring up trouble twisted the knife deeper. Here he was, a man who fought for the freedoms of others, now judged and ostracized in the quiet streets he called home. His breathing grew heavy, the tightness in his chest spreading. Anger surged like a tidal wave, drowning the initial shock and pain. This wasn't random vandalism, it was a deliberate message, an attack on everything he stood for. John's mind raced through possibilities, wondering if confronting Mark or the others would only escalate the bitterness. Yet, inside, a stubborn resolve began to build, a refusal to be broken or driven out by spite. In that moment, the garden wasn't just destroyed flora and torn fabric, it was the battleground for his dignity, his legacy. The quiet neighborhood was no longer just a place to heal. It had become a front line in a different kind of fight. And John, a Marine trained to endure and overcome, knew deep down that surrender was not an option. He took a slow, steadying breath, eyes narrowing as he surveyed the damage once more. This was pain and anger, but it was also the spark that would ignite the fire to fight back, to reclaim what had been taken, and to remind his neighbors who he really was. Night draped the neighborhood in a heavy silence, broken only by the low murmur of voices and the soft clatter of tools. Captain Ryan Collins led the small band of Marines with measured precision, their every movement disciplined yet fueled by a fierce urgency. The vandalism against John wasn't merely a petty act of neighborhood spite. It was an assault on their collective honor, a wound inflicted on the very ideals they had sworn to uphold. Each man carried more than just tools. They bore the weight of brotherhood, loyalty, and a shared history steeped in sacrifice. Their arrival at John's property was almost ceremonial. The faintest rustle of footsteps on gravel, the quiet unfolding of tarps to shield their work. Every detail mirrored the stealth and respect of a covert operation. These men knew how to fight in the shadows, and tonight's battle was to reclaim dignity, not with weapons, but with paintbrushes and planted seeds. The cracked concrete porch, once defaced with hateful graffiti, awaited their careful touch. The uprooted flowers, torn from earth like the memories they honored, demanded restoration. Ryan took the lead, gently unfurling a fresh American flag, its colors vivid under the muted glow of a portable lantern. As he raised it on the pole, a silent vow echoed through the night air, to honor those who came before and protect those still standing. Beside him, Corporal Diaz scrubbed away the scars of spray paint with steady hands, transforming ugly defacements into a pristine canvas. Private Lee, kneeling in the soil, planted vibrant blooms, red, white, and blue, each stem a testament to resilience. There was no chatter, no idle conversation, only the quiet hum of determined effort. These were men forged by hardship, bonded by a creed that transcended time and distance. Every stroke of the brush, every careful placement of a flower, was imbued with purpose. It was a ritual of redemption and respect, turning an act of cruelty into a rallying point for unity. Inside the house, John watched through the window, his heart tightening with a complex mix of disbelief and gratitude. The day's weight of isolation and doubt that had pressed down on him seemed to lift with every deliberate movement outside. Here were men who refused to let him stand alone, who understood that his pain was their pain, that his dignity was intertwined with theirs. The shadows that had loomed over his spirit began to recede, replaced by a quiet flame of hope. As the final touches were laid, a neat row of flowers, the porch repainted a crisp white, the yard transformed into a symbol far greater than its parts. It became a living testament to brotherhood, a beacon that proclaimed defiance against hatred and despair. The Marines' response spoke volumes. In the face of darkness, they would stand as one, rebuilding not just gardens, but spirits. When Ryan stepped back and saluted the restored flag, it was a gesture that reached beyond military formality. It was a promise, to John, to each other, and to the ideals they all cherished. This night was a turning point, a rekindling of hope that no act of vandalism could extinguish. John's sanctuary was no longer just his own. It belonged to every Marine who understood sacrifice, honor, and the unbreakable bond of brotherhood. The morning sun cast long, golden shafts of light over the neighborhood, illuminating a scene transformed. Not merely by fresh paint or new blooms, but by an unspoken reckoning. The restored yard, vibrant with the renewed flag fluttering gently in the breeze, radiated a quiet dignity that seemed to draw the community like moths to a flame. Neighbors gathered in small clusters along the sidewalks, their voices hushed with a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and something more profound, respect. Mark Turner stood at the edge of the crowd, his shoulders hunched, as if the weight of the previous night's shame pressed down on him physically. His eyes darted nervously between John and the assembled Marines, whose presence loomed as a silent testament to unwavering loyalty. The man who had sown division now found himself confronted by the very unity he had tried to undermine. For a moment, Mark's practiced bitterness faltered. The mask cracked, revealing the fractured man beneath, wounded, lost, and desperate for redemption. It was a misunderstanding, Mark muttered, voice uneven, attempting to deflect the palpable tension. His words, however, rang hollow in the face of the visible proof of solidarity. The flag that symbolized sacrifice, the fresh flowers that signified renewal, and the steady gaze of John Miller, who stood tall despite the wounds inflicted upon him. John's eyes met Mark's, steady and unflinching. The years etched into his face spoke of battles fought far beyond this quiet street, battles that demanded courage beyond anger. He spoke slowly, deliberately, choosing each word like a soldier selecting his path through a minefield. "This flag represents more than just pride," John said, voice calm but firm. "It honors the men and women who gave everything so that we could live free. What happened here wasn't just vandalism. It was an attack on all of us, but I'm not here to make enemies. A hush fell over the crowd as John continued, his words weaving a thread between pain and forgiveness. Mark, I know pain. We all carry it in different ways. You lost your job, your purpose. Those things don't just disappear, but tearing down what others build only deepens the wounds for you and for all of us. If we want this neighborhood and this country to stand strong, we have to rebuild, together. Mark's resentment began to unravel under the weight of John's unexpected grace. His jaw tightened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through as he swallowed hard. I didn't know how to handle it, he confessed, voice low. Seeing you, the flag, your yard, it reminded me of what I lost. I let that bitterness turn me into someone I'm not proud of. The crowd shifted, eyes softening as the raw honesty in Mark's admission rippled through them. The confrontation that could have erupted into division instead became a moment of connection, of understanding that beneath resentment and anger lie shared human struggles. John extended his hand, not in challenge, but in invitation. Let's fix this, not just the yard, but the spirit of this community. We're stronger when we stand side by side, not when we tear each other down. As Mark hesitated, then took the offered hand, a collective breath seemed to pass through the neighbors. The yard, once a battleground, had become a crucible of transformation. It symbolized something far greater than flowers and paint. It embodied resilience, the power of forgiveness, and the unyielding strength of brotherhood. In that moment, the neighborhood witnessed the birth of a new chapter, one where pain was met with hope and isolation gave way to unity. John's yard was no longer just a tribute to fallen comrades. It was a beacon that illuminated the path from conflict to reconciliation, inspiring all who saw it to believe in the possibility of healing, justice, and community.